Hello and welcome to another episode of
Absolute Game Off.
Nerd! All right. This week I am flying solo. JP was solo last week. He had something today, so I'm flying solo today, but we got another great guest with me today. I have Bob, also known as Mr. Longbox. I've gotten to know Bob over his podcast with his son-in-law, Joshua, aka Spro, in their podcast, The Comic Room. So happy I actually officially met Bob 2 weeks ago on Brandon's Big Live 5. So Bob, how you doing? Thanks for coming on.
Rohan, I'm doing great, man. I was rocking out on your music. I was like, let's keep it rolling. That was good stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. This is cool.
Yeah. So we always start off every episode with the same question. What is your origin story? So take us back. How did it all start for you?
Yes, my origin story was born in conflict. I was my best friend from second grade. I mean, he's best man at my wedding, so we're still one of my best friends. But we met in second grade. We were just best buddies. We were inseparable. Lived on the same block. And then the summer between fifth grade and sixth grade, we got in a fight. I don't know what it was about,
argumentative fight or a fist fight?
An argumentative fight.
Okay.
We never actually he was like a Taekwondo guy. I wasn't that stupid. And I was like, we kept it verbal. And it's just one of those petty things. And so we kind of blew off the whole summer together. He went and hung out with another guy. And I met somebody else. Are we talking
about dating or about your best friend here?
No, that's what I know, right? It sounds like the dating thing, but I became friends with another guy who all three of us are still good friends now. But what ended up happening was my friend Chris, the guy that he started hanging out with that summer, he was a comic book collector. So when we, got over whatever it was, sometime in August, my friend Chris had discovered this new hobby, and he's like, "Hey, Bob, check this out. Like, let me introduce you to this whole hobby that this other guy introduced me to." And I don't know what happened to the other guy. He moved away, but me and Chris went all the way. So that was us from sixth grade on. We were just riding our bikes to the convenience store after school, thumbing through the spinner racks, picking up the best books. What
were the titles you were into then?
Oh man, all the Frank Miller Daredevils were rolling out, so I was huge into that. Like I mean, I don't know if everyone's read that, but if you haven't, you should. The Frank Miller run from 168 to especially 181, but you could throw in 182 and 183. But they're incredible. It's an incredible story. But imagine what it was like to have to wait a month between issues, because no one who's read that does that. It's like binging your favorite show, right? Like
for sure. I mean, now we get upset when we have to wait a week to watch our favorite
right
show.
A month, man, a month. We'd have to wait a month, and then sometimes you'd get to the shop. It wasn't a comic shop, it was like a liquor store, and they just weren't there. Oh, sorry, they didn't come. Right, and put them out yet. So we'd have to wait another day. It's just brutal, So that was hot. The X-Men, obviously, Claremont Byrne run was a big deal back then. They were, I think, around issue right about the Dark Phoenix saga was happening right about that. I mean, could you pick a better time, right?
Yeah.
And then just as those storylines were winding down, New Teen Titans jumps on the scene, the whole Perez Wolfman run. So I was pretty spoiled. I had a lot of good stuff.
You were in a heyday, you should say.
Yeah.
The runs.
Yeah.
It's funny about the Daredevil. I was gonna say, I haven't read them, but like everyone, I've heard many people talk about like up until Frank Miller got involved, like Daredevil was pretty meh. Yeah, and then when he got involved, it really upped the ante and got great. So I'm not surprised.
Something changed when at some point in the Miller run, I can't remember what issue it is right now, but it says now monthly. So in other words, they couldn't even sustain it as a monthly title until Miller started drawing it and then ultimately writing it. And then it just, they were printing it like mad,
It's amazing then that, again, I wasn't reading back then, but like just hearing that, especially the monthly part, that they continued with Daredevil. I mean, you think about like X-Men, they stopped at 66 and started just reprinting. Hulk kind of came to it and end really quickly.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, they stuck with Daredevil, and then obviously hit pay dirt at 168.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, Joshua, he's such a Daredevil fan. He'll tell you this even before I will, but such a great character, such a great concept. You just, sometimes you just need the right team, you need the right person to execute it.
I know, and I've heard Joshua talk about the show, which I also love the show.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I guess I should ask him. I'm curious did you ever see the Lou Ferrigno Hulk where they had Daredevil on it?
Are you kidding? Yes. Everything about that show is much better in my memory than it is in reality.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. I was actually having this conversation with a few people earlier today. Actually, it was just like so many of those like 80s flicks. It's just like there's a bunch. Again, I grew up with a family that immigrated here from India, so I saw a lot of them.
Yeah.
But then there's a whole slew that I've never seen. So people are like, oh, you should watch this, you should watch that. It's like, the thing is like, if I don't have that nostalgia of like the memories of the 80s as a kid watch this, like, I just don't think a lot are going to hold up. Like those Hulk ones are a perfect example. Like I thought those were the sickest when I was a kid. And there's just no way if I was to turn those on.
They don't hold up.
Yeah.
No, the $6 million man, all that stuff. It doesn't really hold up. Oddly, to me at least, the Star Trek original TV series, even though it was in syndication by the time I was watching it, because it came out in the late 60s. I was born in the late 60s. I watched that in the 80s, and I'll still watch it. I understand that the tech is lame and the effects are lame, but the stories are really good. Gene Roddenberry was a great storyteller.
I mean, when you actually have a quality thing, like it overcomes the evolution of the industry. For example, one of the movies in my discussion earlier that was brought up as an example, Back to the Future, I will argue to this day is still an objectively fantastic movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. One of my favorite show of all time is Seinfeld. And I actually think TV is in its peak right now. There's just so many good shows. I'm really loving it. Yeah. But still, like Seinfeld, I can still watch every day, and I am cracking up. Like,
yeah. I watched that when it came out in the 90s. And then just last year, my wife started just running it back, and, and I would just kind of like be walking through the living room. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting down next to her on the couch watching like 4 episodes because they're so funny, and you can pick it up at any point. They weren't really a serial for the most part. So you could,
pick up anywhere.
Yeah. So if they just want a good laugh, it's hard for comedy to hold up. But because it was all about human nature, it's always going to be fun.
And I will tell this, what I love about it, and this is all of Seinfeld's here, even if you were to see him stand up. I have 3 young kids, and sometimes you just want to throw on the TV and they're awake or whatever, they're around.
Yep.
Seinfeld, I have no concern about what could be coming on screen for 5 and 7-year-olds. Like it's totally fine.
Yeah.
Whereas like some other things that I do enjoy watching, it's like I gotta pause if they come by, or what I mean?
Most definitely. Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of innuendo in Seinfeld, just like there was in Happy Days, but it just goes right over your head when you're a kid. You don't have any context for that.
100%.
So it's just, but I mean, Seinfeld was such a huge cultural phenomenon that at the end of the 90s, I can't remember if it was Life magazine. It was one of these magazines did some kind of a poll of what whoever they were polling thought was the most significant development of the 90s. And number 2 was the internet, which I was like, no, it's going to be the internet. It's got to be the internet. Although it was still only 1999, but number 1 was Seinfeld. Over the internet, over internet banking, over like
take that, Al Gore.
That's right. Take that. Yeah, crazy.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. Anyways, let's spin back.
All right.
So you started between 5th and 6th grade. You get it. When I listen to you talk with Joshua, did you ever take a break from comics, or were you kind of in it? Okay, talk to me about that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm like I have so many different hobbies. I'm like this lazy Susan of hobbies that just kind of rotates, from whether it's chess or lizards in a terrarium or who knows what. It's just all kinds of eclectic stuff, and comic books are on that lazy Susan, and it just kind of rotates around. And I never didn't keep an eye on it. I was always watching the prices and picking up things here and there. But for a while, especially when I was raising my kids, I was selling comics because I needed the money to afford, raising my family. And so I was not in the acquisition part of it. So I just kind of sold, I jumped in, sold some, and then jumped back out and didn't think about it for a bit. But I've kind of gone in and out a few different times. And so this is like my third iteration of it now, but it's my most dangerous because I don't have any more kids to raise.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're on your own.
Yeah.
I want to say I've heard you mention a few, like, I used to have this and I sold it. Like, talk to me in that scenario. Are there any regrets that you wish you still hadn't sold this book or that book?
Yeah, every book I ever sold, I regret. It's true. I'm not really I'm never going to be a retailer. I'm never going to be a reseller. I'll sell out of necessity, but if I could, I'd keep them all. But yeah, I mean, I had multiple copies of the whole McFarlane Spider-Man run. I
think that's one I think I remember you talking about.
Yeah. And I traded up for that, but I mean, I sold this is before grading, so you have to take my word for it, but it was a really, really super high grade, near minty plus Iron Man 1. Same thing for FF48. Same thing for Journey into Mystery 88, which was second Loki, first Bifrost cover, which I think is cool.
I love that cover. It's kind of, I mean, kind of corny, but I love it.
Gorgeous, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had some. The one I regret the most is Human Torch 23. It's a Schomburg robot cover. It's got the Torch Submariner on it. It's truly incredible, and it was nearly perfect, just missing a tiny little, not even a quarter-inch corner of the lower piece of the lower right corner. And I just saw one recently sold. I think comic book nerd. I think that's his handle, but he was talking about the Heritage. The Heritage auction that recently ended, and a copy of that sold in worse condition than mine because it had writing on the cover and it came out a 9, so maybe it would have been better. But anyway, sold for like $5,900 or something like that. I sold mine for $500 on eBay in the mid 2000s. Anyway, I wish I had at least waited until I trusted grading enough to get them graded, because I would have made a lot more. A mint copy of Werewolf 32. I mean, you just couldn't find anything wrong with it at all. And in 2001, I could have sold that thing for $12,000,
Yeah.
But but the thing is, though, I wish I still had everything I sold, but I don't regret that I sold them, because I sold them for a good reason. So that's kind of how I look at it. And I always, back in the day, my Chris and I would say, hey, someday we'll buy a car with this, or someday we'll, and that's exactly what I did. Like I used those comics for things I needed in my life, try to get a down payment together for a house, or trying to pay for my kids' school. So they weren't the wrong. There was none of those decisions were bad, but you can still regret a good decision.
100%. Talk to me. What kind of collector would you say you are? Like key collector, run collector? I classify myself as a first appearance collector specifically. Like what was your lane?
Yeah, I think I'm very much a emotional collector, as in like if I'm not careful, I can turn into a run collector, but I got to watch out for that, because I don't have enough room, and it just turns into a grind, and you're wondering why you're doing it. But it does give you something to shoot for, and that's fun. But there's certain just books that for whatever reason I gravitate toward. Like there's just an emotional want of this particular book. Like I've got just up on the wall on the other side of my monitor here is Detective Comics 122. It's the first Catwoman cover. It's that yellow cover, and she's scratching Robin across the shoulder, and like it's kind of like reminiscent of that one where Batman slaps Robin.
Oh yeah. I know talking about.
That's on my want list. I don't know when I will buy it, but I know that I will at some point. And why is it on my want list? Because I think it's a cool cover. Like there's no other reason for it. I'm not really a Batman collector. I'm not a Detective Comics collector. I just like that book, and so.
Can I say, when I listen to you guys talk, and oftentimes when I hear you talk about books you got, it does seem to me that I would classify you almost as a cover collector, and because that's what draws the biggest emotion out of you.
Yeah, I really think you that's really astute. I think that's absolutely true, which makes slapping a book really fun for me, because I don't feel like I lose much, because I actually get a way to display it safely. Yeah, I definitely am a cover collector. Like I have more comics in my collection that I haven't read than I have comics that I have read. And I kind of feel bad about that, because I teach I'm a college professor. I teach writing. That's my job. And yet
And here you are telling people to judge the book by its cover.
I'm totally judging by the cover all the time. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'll read it someday, kind of thing. But I do love to read the books too. But I am drawn by the covers. There is one run that I am after, and that's the Fantastic Four. I'm always after good, high grade copies of FF, because that was what I started as a kid, and I'm never going to get over it.
You started on the run, or you started just reading it in general?
I started reading it, and then I decided that I was going to collect as many of those as I could get my hands on. My friend Chris chose Iron Man. For some reason, neither one of us chose Spider-Man, which is really regretful, because I would have gotten right about then. I think would have been your first Black Cat. Would have been certainly all the McFarlanes. I got those anyway, but there was a lot of good stuff in Spider-Man right about that time that I just didn't get. And X-Men would have been good too, but it was already too expensive. So that's why.
Yeah. When it comes to FF, when you say collecting the run, is it like just the Kirby run? Is it the entire run? Like where are we living?
Yeah, my initial dreams were I want to get them all, and I knew there were certain ones I couldn't afford and all that, but now I think I'm more realistic. I kind of cap it at like the first 250, kind of, and then I've gotten a lot of those. But once you get into the first issue 1, issue 5, issue 12, I don't have those. And I don't have issue 1, 2, 3, or 4. And I don't have issue 12. I've never had either one.
Well, I know someone who has a 3 that you know.
Here's the deal with that. He's my son-in-law. I love him to death. I'm not going to interfere with his attempt, which I know will be successful, to launch his retail business, and that's such a good book for him to have in his inventory. I think he should have that to sell it. So I'm not even going to offer on it because if I can get it from somewhere else, I'm as much as I want that book, and he would give me a good deal on it. I think it's in his best interest to keep it and bring it into a claim sale. So I want that for him,
Yeah.
So, but I'm not saying, I mean, like my kids say, I'm not going to lie. Like, yes, I'm green with envy. I want that book badly, but it's not going anywhere. I mean, someone will have that book for me down the road,
Yeah. So like you say in high grade, what are you considering high grade for you in this run?
Man, it's funny how that changes the more expensive the book gets. But,
that's why I'm asking.
I think, if I'm just saying just objectively, what do I think a high grade is? It would be an 8.5 or higher is what I consider to be like, it's hard to find a flaw on the book. But realistically, a 7.0 or higher is I think everybody considers that to be a really clean book. But if you're talking about one of these major keys, I would take one in a 4.0 or higher. And for like FF1, you want one of those, right?
Oh yeah, that's the next book on the list.
Okay, listen, I just saw one right before I logged in. Ali Collectibles is selling.
Yeah, the 1.8.
I thought of you right away.
I've been talking with. We can talk about it off. Yeah, I've been discussing with him. We discussed today, I should say. So
yeah. Okay, good. Because when you're talking about like your Mount Rushmore books, I'll take any grade. Like it just to have it. I don't. If it's got the cover on it and it doesn't look like it's been given to the pet pit bull for 2 hours, I'm cool with it. Like I'm not even going to have a problem with it. But because what you said is true. I love a good cover. I don't want like major color breaking creases or like tears and detached. Not detached, I don't mind because it still looks clean, but I just want it to look good. No,
100%. I mean, as you saw on that stream with Brandon, like both my X-Men 1 and my FF5 are 1.5s, and I couldn't be happier with how they present. But then,
they look great. Yeah.
On the other hand, you can get a 1.5 that literally looks like I wiped my butt with it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, we all follow a lot of the consignment pages on Instagram. There are 3.0s and 4.0s I see of those books that I don't think hold a candle to my 1.5.
No,
right?
Yeah,
it just depends on where the damage is, and the good thing is like you 100% can find some where the cover in its perpetuity or in its the central focus of the cover is left fairly clean.
Yep.
Right. Like you get a lot of damage to the back of the book, to the edges, whatever, but that center kind of piece of the cover is there and in great shape and looks great and, good to go as far as
Yeah, exactly. I've got a beautiful copy of FF49 that I paid $13 for back in early '80s at a convention, and I finally got it slabbed, and it comes back color touch. And I mean, who's color touching a $13 book? I don't think CGC got it right, but because I can't find it, I put it under a light. Joshua's looked at it. I'm thinking about sending it back in.
Resubmit it.
Yeah, it's an expensive book to get graded, but it came back a 7.0, which I thought was higher than it would. I thought it would get like a 6.5. Came back a 7.0. If only CGC didn't put a different color on it, I wouldn't care. Like if it
was like CBCS where they kept them all blue.
Yeah, just keep it blue and just say so. But they change the color, so now it bugs me every time I see it, and it's just frustrating.
Here's where I would put my 2 cents in there.
All right.
If it's in my collection, I am with you, right? Like, again, personally, I don't really want to get into restored books when it comes to silver. Golden Age, I think, is a different story.
Yeah, totally.
But so, like, if we're looking at a book in my collection, like, I would agree with you, the blue. However, I do get annoyed when, like, I will see a blue CBCS label for a book that I'm looking for. Like, let's just say FF1, right?
Right.
And you'll be like, oh my God, blue label, that's a great price. And then you miss, like, in the little tiny, it's like, oh, restoration right there. So it's like, son of them. Whereas, like, when you're shopping, the purple label is a nice identifier to automatically, kind of disqualify. So there are pros and cons.
I agree. I know Joshua picked up a really nice Tales of Suspense, the first Pepper Potts and what's the other guy? What's the other guy's name? I want to say Froggy Nelson. I know that's not it. Anyway,
Jarvis.
Yeah, Jarvis. Is it? Yeah, I think it's Jarvis. Anyway, and it was a good price. They got it at San Diego this year. But as we were driving home, he saw that it was CBCS, and he saw that it was trimmed. The top edge was trimmed, but he missed that.
Yeah, exactly.
He still likes the book, and it was still like even for that, it was a good price, but it wasn't the deal he thought. So I hear you on that. It's true, but maybe I'll send it back in, but not right now because I think the wait for CGC is like 80 days, 100 days.
Yeah, I know. I don't know the numbers. I'm not a huge grader, so that I've seen a lot of people talking about like how the weights have gone, and I saw something that's like it's either between like 80 and 120 days.
Yeah, what happens? But I'm not waiting that long. No way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess they did a bunch of layoffs and. Who knows?
I like what you said about the Golden Age and restoration, though. I believe that there are a lot of really good deals to be had with restored Golden Age books because some people, not everybody, but some people really just won't buy a restored book. But I mean, I remember when restoring a book was considered good stewardship of the book.
No, exactly. And I think that's why you find a lot of Golden Age books that are restored because of that exact concept. And I just think too, again, it would also depend on the book, right? Like there are plenty of Golden Age books that are great that are not hard to find and plenty available, and the price isn't out of this world where, you could totally find a blue label. But like, you're talking about, let's just say Superman 1, for example, like the fact that you have that in any, that's even one where it's like, if I was able to come into a one that even looked like it was one that I got my butt wiped with, like I would still be happy. You know what I'm saying? Because like less than 200 people own that thing on the planet of 7 billion people. Like it's freaking awesome no matter what. Right. I mean, that's even one too, where it's like, some people will get like the repro cover if they get a coverless. I wouldn't even want to do the repro cover. I would just keep it coverless. Be like, that's a Superman 1.
Yeah. Deal with it. Take it.
Yeah.
Like, it is what it is. Yeah. That would be, I would not have a problem with one of those holy grail books in any shape at all. I talked to my dad about that. I'm like, Dad, so would you read these Golden Age books? He's like, yeah, I would. He said he would get all the coverless ones because they would just give them away because the retailers would. I think the way he explained it, they would get money back if they sent
the cover, right?
They sent the covers. They would get them reimbursed or get credit or something like that. So then they would sell the coverless ones like half the price, 5 cents or 3 for 10 cents or whatever it was. But so he would say like, so it doesn't really matter if I would have kept mine because they didn't have any cover. I'm like, no, it wouldn't have mattered. Like, are you kidding? Like any condition.
I mean, so this is now 2 years ago. I got to take a photo with an Action Comics 1 that the cover was Now, part of it was the original, like the Superman was still the original, but then they recreated and filled in the rest. And I got to take a picture with that and the Superman one and Batman one. But that comic went on auction. And I don't know him, but I follow the guy who bought it. It sold for $184,000. Right. And it was an NG, no grade, because it was not a full original cover. And it's like, so in your dad's case, right? I mean, maybe you didn't have Action 1, but if you have something like, there's still, for some of those books, like, it's still big time.
I'm sure you've heard that. Well, I don't know if you have or not, but that story about that guy, somebody bought some house in the Midwest, and he was tearing a wall down, and there was an Action Comics 1 stuffed in the wall as inspiration. Like that's crazy. But then every time I lament, I wish, everybody had kept their comics, because, then the comics wouldn't have the value they do. So, and
that's part of the allure and the story that goes with it. And I was like, take it back to your Fantastic Four 49. Like, so you may think like, hey, that book is dropped quite a bit and you could get a decent copy for a couple $100 now. But I actually think especially if you can get it into a blue label, like the fact that you can always tell the stories, like, I got this one for $13.
Exactly.
Like, that's great. Like, to me, like, even more important than that, the value, or not necessarily the value, but the quality is like, if there's a story involved, that makes it sentimentally valuable to you. And that is even cooler.
I have so many stories like that. Let me tell you one. I'll tell you this one. This is a quick one. My Daredevil 158 is, it's signed by Frank Miller on the splash page. And it's his old signature back in the 80s when he signed the big F, and the big M, and he signed the whole thing. And the story behind it is, this was the very first comic convention that I went to. Me and my buddy Chris went to his convention in the, I believe it was the Moscone Center or something, Cow Palace, somewhere in San Francisco. And it was a creation con. And this is, everybody was after Daredevil 158. Everybody was. And X-Men 137, Death of Phoenix, and New Teen Titans 1, and Detective Comics 20, or DC Presents 26. That was what those are the hot new books. And so everybody had.
Wait, real quick. What's the key on 158?
It's just Frank Miller's first work on it.
Oh, I thought 168 was his first.
That was first Elektra, and 168 was when he took over. He took over the writing a couple issues before that, but 168 was where the Elektra storyline begins.
Oh, okay. I also thought that was also just his first.
No, 158. And back then, people paid a lot of money for the first time. Like X-Men 108 was a lot more back then than it is now, because it was first Byrne artwork on X-Men, but now nobody really cares about that anymore. But
first artwork first. Unless it's like Captain America 3 first stand, like that's a different story. But for the most part, like first Todd McFarlane in Marvel, I mean, you can get these for a couple bucks.
Yeah, it's wild, right? But everybody wanted it. So every dealer had one, and Chris and I went to this one guy, and he had the best price, and it was like $35. And I'm talking to $30 maybe. But we're like 13, 12-year-old kids. He didn't want to deal with us. Like, I understand it now, but he had in his hand, his prized possession was a signed copy of Daredevil 158. And he was showing this guy, and I asked him, hey, can we see it? And he took one look at us. He's like, no,
get out of here.
No, you can't, and he's real dismissive. At least to my little 13-year-old, I'm going to fight the world, mind. And so we walked away all hacked off about it. And I'll take an umbrage over it. And by the end of the convention, though, he still had the best deal. So I went back to him, tucked my pride in between my legs, and went back, and bought Daredevil 158 from him. And I get home. Wait,
what price did you buy it for back then?
I paid $30.
Oh, $30. Okay.
So he had several copies, right? It wasn't that rare, right? And I get home and I open it up, and it's signed.
Oh, he accidentally gave you the sign.
I think, I was like, wait, and I'm glad I didn't look at it at the convention, because I didn't have the moral dilemma. It was too late. I was back home. That's the way it goes, right? I don't think I would have given it back to him anyway, because I felt a certain kind of way about him.
Yeah. This is a 13-year-old. You've been like, peace.
Yeah, deuces, man. Thanks. And so that book that has been signed in my collection all these years, and I finally sent it in to CBCS to get it verified. And all this time, in the back of my mind, it was like, I wonder if it's real. I wonder if it's you know what I mean? Like that little bit, but it came back authenticated and everything. So that book, I'm never going to sell that book, because that story, someday, like I put the story out in a couple different places on the internet. One day that guy's going to reach out. He's going to go, "Hey man, I remember you because you have my book." And I'm going to go, "You should have been nicer to me, dude. Too bad."
Yeah. You reap what you sow, buddy.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, quick question. Going to cons in the 80s, you know, there's the famous story of someone buying the original art for the cover of Giant Size X-Men in like 1988 or something like that. And it was $85 at the table. And he's like, the guy's like, I got him down to $75 and I got it. I mean, that's $1 million piece of original art today. And did you ever have any thought towards that at that time? Or did you see anything or think about anything of that back then?
Yeah. Man, you know, you talk about your bad beats, you know, whether it's you're betting horses, you're playing poker, or you're buying or not buying comic books. I remember I was in college, maybe my freshman year, and I'd been working for this guy who was really like a savvy businessman. So he was training me, teaching me on how to like strike a hard bargain and get a better deal, you know, all kind of stuff. Right. So I go to this convention in Oakland, and I'm feeling myself, and I'm showing up, and I'm like, yeah, will you take this much for it? I'm like driving all these hard bargains, and it worked out for in a couple different instances. I got some decent deals. And then I strut up to this one guy who's got a beautiful, perfect copy of Silver Surfer 4. I mean, it was beautiful. I mean, it was like mint. There was no near mint. It was just like, there was nothing wrong with it. He wanted $35 for it.
Dang.
He wouldn't go down to 30. So I walked away. You know, oops. You know, feeling like I'm going to, you know, I got to make sure that I got to be willing to walk away. That's what he said. And man, I mean, it probably wouldn't have survived my one or two sales that I had of comics anyway. But I think about that sometimes because there were opportunities like that. Like, you know, when I started collecting, Fantastic Four issue #1 in mint condition was a $2,000 book. Now that might as well have been $2 million for me, but there was a lot of opportunity, you know, a lot of opportunity. And original art wasn't something that, yeah, it was around, but it was really just sort of curiosity. Yeah, no one really thought much of it. And which is crazy because you're in a room full of collectors spending a lot of money for old paper. So you would think like anything's possible, right? You know, like I thought, you know, in 2000, I was like trying to figure out what was going to be worth something, you know, well, maybe like this Monopoly game that's about Silicon Valley because it's got all these defunct companies like Alta Vista, you know, and all. So let me buy a couple of versions of this game and store it in my garage for 20 years for nothing. But what I didn't save are any of my video games. Like I just tossed that. It's like nothing, you know. And I see video games are worth more than comic books. They sell faster and for more on these when I see them on these clam sales. It blows my mind, and I figure, how did I miss it? Because I was looking and I still missed it.
I always think it's interesting too. You think about like a lot of that kind of thing. You know, take toys, for example, or even these video games, right? The most value comes from ones that are unopened.
Yeah.
And I always just think like, who the hell was buying this Optimus Prime and then not unboxing it? And it's like, there were obviously adults that were like looking at that and be like, they're, you know, because maybe they learned from the G.I. Joe toys from 40 years ago that are unboxed. And so they're like, this is going to be it, you know? I mean, but they exist, right? Like, how do people still have these like VHSs that are like still in the cellophane?
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand. But hey, I've got an unopened copy of like Silicon Valley-opoly if you want to buy it.
Or offered for trade for an FF1.
Yeah, sure. I missed that one. Darn. If only I had, you know, I mean, everybody can say these things, but yeah, there were a lot of, it's just odd when you think about it. Cause me and my friend in 1985 were like, wow, if we were alive in 65, think of all the things we would have known to get. Meanwhile, there in 1985, we weren't buying multiple copies of Dark Knight 1. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't buying a stack of Watchmen issue 1. I didn't go seek out Cerebus 1 or TMNT 1.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that I could have ever found it because those were genuinely scarce.
Yeah.
But even a second printing, right? But no, I was busy like buying multiple copies of Dazzler issue 10. Like what was I thinking? You know? So you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we were all as kids specking on Jim Lee X-Men 1 and Death of Superman and
Oh
Todd
gosh,
McFarlane
how many
Spider-Man.
copies of Man of Steel of that run do I have? Like I finally like let them all go in a garage sale, this long box. I'm like, just somebody take it for $50. Take the whole long box
The the
away.
the funniest thing I always think about when it comes to that is the issue where he actually died that came in the actual black poly
Yeah.
bag. I vividly remember going into a comic shop and seeing those in the case for $100. And it's like, you could buy that black poly bag today for nothing.
It's so ridiculous. It's actually cheaper now.
Yeah.
They've paid us to store them. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Yeah. The trick is when everybody's looking this way, you got to look that way, but you have to look that way at the right thing.
Yeah.
I tend to snub my nose at manufactured scarcity. That's what got me out of sports cards. I got turned off by the, hey, here's a die cut 1 of 20, 1 of 10. Like, you just get to be just
Yeah.
fatigue, right? And that happened in the comics in the 90s for sure. It was just got to be too much. And then the alternate variant covers and all that stuff. But sure enough, like there's certain variant covers that are thousands. So I mean, it's hard to know what the industry is gonna want, But that's part of the fun, right? But that's really part of the fun.
Yeah, 100%. Talk to me. So I'm interested to hear about this kind of a little bit of a detour now or change from what we were just talking about. But so Joshua is your son-in-law, i.e., he's married to your daughter.
Yeah.
Obviously, they probably dated prior to getting married, I'm assuming.
Yep.
What point did you and he connect on comics? And like, how did that even evolve?
Yeah. It evolved after they were married. Like he had dabbled in comic books as a young guy, like in high school maybe. And then, then he had moved on to other things. And then he and Dara met, and my philosophy with my daughters and who they date has always been, unless like there's a major, and there weren't, but unless there's like a major red flag,
He's a criminal.
You're right. Like all I care about is does this man love you, and do I believe him? Because and obviously, my daughter Dara loves him, and I mean, I'll never forget he's a good guy, man, and he I don't know if he texted me or emailed me or called me, I can't remember which, but he asked to meet me to get my blessing to propose, even, and we sat down in front of a coffee at a coffee shop near his job, and he told me what his intentions were, and the only thing I asked him was what, because I already knew him by then. I just said, what do you love most about my daughter? Because I didn't want to hear him say, well, she's just awesome, or she's really pretty, or anything like that. And he gave me an answer that really indicated that he knew who she was, and that's all I really, I was gonna give him my blessing either way, but that made it even easier for me. And then they got married, and probably had been married for about a year or so. And he asked me about my comic collection. He got into baseball cards, and he actually got me a cool baseball card. I collect Will Clark. He's my favorite guy from the Giants.
From the Giants. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we kind of got talking about collectible stuff, and he asked about I think it was maybe 2021. He asked to see my collection, and I had maybe 7 or 8 short boxes. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And so I busted them out, and he kind of was going through them, and that was it, man. That was it. Like he was already getting back into it. That's why he wanted to see my collection, and he started buying comics and showing me what he was buying. And I was like, that's great, but I wasn't spending any money yet. And then all of a sudden, like, the lazy Susan rotated and the floodgates open. So I'm here, I'm mixing my metaphors, but next thing you know, I'm right there with him, and I'm like as into it as I ever was, and
Right.
even more so than I ever was, honestly, because having someone like him to share it with makes it, it's like being a kid.
That's great. I mean, like, you think about like most people don't want to hang out with their in-laws, right? Like you guys
Yeah.
got like you guys kind of hit the lottery in that sense.
Yeah, we really did. I mean, that was what was so much fun about it when I was a kid, was that me and my friend did it together. And
Yeah.
then when I was, doing it on my own, it was, I'd kind of come in, get in and out of it because, who am I really going to, it's half the fun is showing your friends what you picked up, right?
Agreed. 100%. I tell people like, I got back into collecting and then I got on Instagram just because I was like, none of my friends in 3D are into this comic thing. Let me just like at least post what I just see if what happens or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's where I ended up meeting people. And there's no doubt in my mind, if I didn't make friends online in this space, I would have probably done it for 6 months and been like, well, that was cool. On to the next.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's the community, it's the relationships, and the comic book community online, whether it's YouTube or Instagram, I guess, is a really welcoming community.
Mhm.
I mean, I know this. Very, very, very sincere. Everybody's just wants to have a good time. Everybody's looking out for each other. Everybody's rooting each other on. Excited to see them fill their run or get that grail they've been hunting. I love it. It's just so much fun. But the most fun is when Joshua and I like, hey, we go to a convention together, and then it's like it's unspoken. Like the convention over, we're exhausted. We've walked like miles, right? We're driving home. It's probably like midnight. We're rolling up, and it's just like, well, whose house we going to? Because we're going to spend the next 2 hours like we're going to bust everything out on the coffee table and like show each other what we got, because that's seriously more than half the fun.
Yeah,
I'm so excited for the books he got, and vice versa.
What's awesome about it too is like, my wife is not into it, and my kids are pretty young, and they have some interest, like they think Spider-Man's cool or something like that, but they don't like understand comics and comic book collecting. They're not old enough for that. And so when I partake in the hobby, I always try to do so where it doesn't take time away from them. Right now, in this scenario where, I was doing it with my father-in-law or something like that, like that's like a thing where it's just like, my wife could never get mad at me for being like, oh, we're going to go to this con, I'm going with your dad. When we gone all day, and it's like, and at the end of the day, it's just like, well, I can't hate on him for hanging out with my dad. And,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's like the perfect scenario for us. We get, it's like if we were both into golf, we'd both get in trouble eventually,
Exactly,
but in this case, it's just not, that's not true. And so like, we joke about it. We try to, we have our podcast, and we got into it because we realized that we could just talk so aggressively about comics for so long that we'd be at these family gatherings, and he and I'd be off in the corner, or just by nature of the two of us being so into this thing and no one else being into it, we kind of like shut everybody else. We shut ourselves away from everything else. So we determined, hey, first off, this is really comfortable and natural and a lot of fun. Why don't we make a podcast out of it? And maybe that will alleviate some of this cutting ourselves off from everybody when we're together. And so we got the podcast going, but it hasn't solved the other half yet. Still, it's either going to be comics or it's going to be sports, one of the two. We're both into both. So, we were just out to dinner, the four of us, my wife and I, and Joshua and Dara, and we realized after we came back from dinner, we should have probably, because Josh and I were sitting on one across the table from each other, and my wife Debbie and Dara were sitting across, and so it was great, but there were two separate conversations going on. Like we should have swapped so it was crisscross so that we could all be like involved in the same thing. But hey, it happens,
Yeah,
it happens.
I was gonna say, just so you said sports too, and you mentioned you were a Will Clark collector.
Yeah.
Just one story I always remember about Will Clark I just wanted to share. So, I'm a huge sports fan too. And one thing I think that's different between sports now and then sports when I was a kid in the 90s is while there are rivalries now, they're different in the sense that like nowadays, I feel like everyone, once the game's over, kind of goes and hangs out and is friends, right? Like you look at the NBA, like LeBron is boys with everyone.
Yeah, Draymond Green and LeBron are hanging out in the summer.
Exactly, right? When you go back to the 90s, like you think about John Starks ever hanging out with Reggie Miller, like no way, right?
No.
And I'm going to butcher the story, and you probably may know it because you're a Will Clark fan, but I remember distinctly Will Clark in some point was just like, man, back then, like when we were in a rivalry, like we fucking hated those guys. And like, it was a legit, like fuck that guy. Like, and I was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, I mean the Giants, specifically Will Clark, whenever they played the St. Louis Cardinals, at some point if it was a 3-game series, there was going to be a fight, or at least the benches were going to clear. One time, Will Clark and Ozzie Smith were like throwing hands, like legit throwing punches at each other because Clark went in too hard in a slide at second. And Will Clark has he's a pretty loud presence on social media these days. I follow him on Twitter and stuff, and he gets interviewed occasionally and often because he's so colorful, and he just throws down. Like, he does not hold back, and he just says it like, he's drinking through the whole thing anyway. So he's really letting it fly. And it's pretty entertaining. Like, yeah, he doesn't really understand the chumminess of today's game. Like for instance, the World Series, this last World Series.
Yeah, Yankees Dodgers.
Okay. After Freddie Freeman, he hit the walk-off grand slam in game 1.
Yep.
And then game 2, he hits another two-run bomb that won the game for the Dodgers. So they go back to Yankee Stadium, and in his first at bat in game 3, hits another 2-run homer in the first inning. And I don't know if Joshua was with me or I texted him, but I'm like, I just don't understand why someone's not throwing at that guy. Like, and I mean, I don't mean to hit him, but you
like getting it, brushing him off the plate.
Yeah, you got to say, hey man, you're way too comfortable at the plate right now. You cannot be. We are not going to sit back and let you tee off on us. Like, we got to make you uncomfortable. And then he hit another 2-run homer in game 4. It's like, what are you guys doing? Do you want to win the World Series or not? It really gets back to what you're saying. I want a little bit of animosity. I do.
I would tell everyone, like, if you want to know what we're talking about, watch the ESPN 30 for 30 of like the Knicks Pacers series, things like that. Like,
the Malice at the Palace.
Those are rivalries, man. Like that. Yeah. That's
anything involving the Pistons in the 90s will do. Yeah. Also, they just and it was fun. I loved that, man. I didn't just, like, nowadays, if you root against a team, people just say you're a hater and they don't really understand it. But that's because I'm bringing that in from the 80s and 90s where you legit hated the other team. Like, you had a reason to. You didn't want them to win ever against anybody. Yeah. But it's different now. It's different.
Yeah, it's definitely different. But no, when you said Will Clark, I was like, oh, I got to talk about this real quick.
Will Clark's a gamer, man. That guy he did not like you when you stepped across those white lines at all. And I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah. Awesome. So going back to kind of you and Josh's, you guys have known each other for a while. Have you guys been talking about doing the podcast for a while, or was it just like one day, like, let's do it, and then on you went, or like, how did
it was really one day, let's do it, and on we went. It wasn't like, we didn't, it's not like I teach a class on podcasting, and I have these guys like give me a business plan. I have them write out blueprints for their episodes. I hope none of my students are watching this because we didn't do any of that stuff. We just like, hey man, what should we talk about? Well, here's a couple of subjects, but let's just try to emulate the way it is when we're hanging out talking, because I really enjoy it. You enjoy it. Maybe other people will too. These are fun. So we just kind of have a broad idea of a few topics that we kind of want to cover. And we just get in his podcast room, which he's really set up nicely, and just turn the cameras on and we go. And that's probably why our episodes are all like way too long. Like, we're breaking all the rules.
I've told this to a bunch of friends. Like, I've made a bunch of friends that have channels and things like that, and I've been honest with them because, like, there's some guys that, like, they just do like YouTube shorts and IG reels. Like, nothing against those that make that content or whatever. It's not for me. Right. Like, I want to watch. I like discussion, debate, informative like, I want to get something out of hearing this discussion. I want to think about, I want what I'm watching to make me think about this. Right. I mean, like, I've messaged now you guys a couple times just based on something that you guys have said in your podcast.
Yeah.
Here's my opinion. Here's my 2 cents on it.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that's what I want out of my content. So, like, I if you look at it really, like, the truly successful people that do like the long, I mean, there's not many of them, to be honest, like, because attention spans are short, and I get that, but like,
right.
I would have no, like, if this channel was just shorts, or like, I just wouldn't do it. Like,
yeah, it's not as fun. It's a lot. You have to work a lot more for less. The way I see it, it also depends on the format too. Like in the if it's we're on, this is destined for YouTube, but if it goes on an audio podcast, I'll listen to an hour and a half podcast, no problem at all. Like I'm in my car, I don't have, or I'm hanging out in my yard doing, pushing a broom around and have a podcast going on. I don't think about how long it is. I listen till I'm not interested, basically. And so, we our podcast is YouTube, and we have an audio version. I don't track what goes on with the audio, but
I listen to it on audio, but
yeah.
I mean, our podcast here, I mean, you and I are just talking. This is what we do every episode. And I have a number of people that are like, yeah, when I listen, I just put my phone down and I'm doing something. Like, I don't need you to watch. I don't need to watch. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. You don't need to watch. Like, it is meant to just be, the discussion is all that matters.
Yeah. So we figure, we talk until we're bored with the topic, and then we move on to the next thing. And then when we're done, we stop. And, Joshua does a great job of editing it. And we, like the last one, he said, yeah, I cut like 20 minutes out. And I'm thinking, oh, so it's gonna be like an hour long. It was like an hour and 45 minutes. I'm like, dude, we talked for like 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's crazy. Didn't feel like it, and it never does. That's the thing. We just, can go and if someone's, the cool thing is if you don't want to listen to what we're talking about, you can fast forward, or you can speed us up, or you can, there's a lot you can do. So, it's, for us, it's just, we're not trying to like go viral with the podcast. We just want to be a part of the community, because it's a lot, like you said, it's a lot of fun. We want to contribute and just be more. I want to be more of a presence in the community than just buying the comics on the claim sales. Like I do that. And I do like that part of the community, but it's fun. It's fun to be able to talk about what you love. Right. And I know that's why you guys do it.
Yeah. And one thing I love too, the stuff that I find most interesting is when people actually give their honest opinion on something. And it doesn't have to be an opinion I agree with, but I do think oftentimes we get in this hobby, we do get caught in a little bit of like, we just cheerlead no matter what, right? Whatever. Right. But I appreciate here, like, for example, like Josh was the only person I know that will dog on the Dark Knight trilogy. Right. And and I love the Dark Knight trilogy. I don't agree with a lot of things, but like, I think it's great that he's just like, this is what I think.
Yeah.
And
I watched that episode. Yeah. He's all in on the Pattinson one.
Yeah. And or another great example is, he got that Avengers one in this collection that he got. And I don't remember for which episode or what, but I remember him said, and I fully agree. And this is where he's like, this book is going for this much. He's like, personally, I don't think it should be that valuable because it's not actually a true first appearance of any of these characters, which I 100% agree. But like, I feel like if you say that a lot, some people will be like, how dare you say that? But like, I love that. Like, that's the type of discussion I like. And again, it doesn't mean that he's right and I'm right, or you're right, or he's whoever. Like, it's thought-provoking discussion, and it makes you think like, do I think that? Do I not think that? Like, that is what I enjoy.
Yeah, I do too. I have some, I'm sure, takes people don't agree with, and that's fine. Like I don't mind it. Like it's good. Otherwise, who wants to live in an echo chamber? That's boring.
Yeah. And that's why I always tell people, like, look, if you ask, I'm gonna give you my opinion.
So what's your craziest hot take then about the comic book? What's a position you take in the comic book industry that you think is contrary to other people's take?
I there's a number of things that I think would probably annoy people a lot, and they're not all my original thoughts, but I agree with them. Like, I mean, a hot take I will tell you, for example, like, I don't think every book has, how do I say this? I think the number of books that actually have true potential to grow in real value is very small compared to what we think it is. Like, I think there are even some major keys, for example, like FF48, I'll give you is a great example. My favorite character is Silver Surfer, right? That book is always going to be one of my favorite books. I would not consider that a book that has great upwards potential, right? I think that number of books that actually do is very small, right? Yeah. Another example is like, I don't think second appearances are worth anything. To me, it's like when I hear people like, oh, first appearance is X, I can get the second appearance for this, and it's a high grade one, and and so I'm just like, I would rather just keep saving and get the first appearance if that, that, and we've talked about, like, I'm very contrary to a lot of people in the sense that, like, I'm not a volume collector. So the way I look at things is very different. And like, sometimes that people don't jive with that opinion often in this hobby, but that's okay.
My perspective on and this sounds weird for someone who's been in and out since the 80s, early 80s. I just don't think anything that I would consider to be current, and by current would be anything from 1970, to today. I would trade any of those books for a decent grade golden age book and feel like I won that trade, no matter what it is. Because
that's why I thought when I told Josh when he got his FF5, I was like, dude, I don't care what you traded. That's a win.
Yeah.
Right. You traded modern books, and there was an MS5 in there, but for the most part, you traded modern books and you got a Silver Age Grail out of it. Like, that is a win every time. Every
time, because you can always get those books again. I mean, they're never not going to be around. I don't understand the infatuation with ASM 300. Like, I don't own it. I don't care to own it. I if someone gave it to me, I'd be happy to have the book, but I'm not even going to pay $50 for it, because there's literally tens of thousands of copies that are graded.
It is the most graded book there is.
But when it comes up on a claim sale, it's boom, it's sold, and I just don't get it. And sometimes I feel like I'm this old fogey, like, whoa, that's too current. But the truth is, I'm not dropping $300, $500, $1,000 on that book. I'd way rather get some. Like, I just picked this book up, and I know a lot of people don't like Westerns. Fine, whatever. Gene Autry Comics issue 1 from 1946 for like $300 and something bucks. Are you kidding me? Like, that's what I want to get. Something that is truly unique, and it's an issue 1. It's worth way more to me than an AS. I don't care what the price guide says. I don't care what it's going for.
And I'll just say this: like, if you want to collect ASM 300 or any modern books or whatever it is, do what you like. I always tell people, what is impressive to me is when there's a passion and kind of a theme behind the collection, right? Like, there's a couple of YouTube guys, for example, that have like all the big books under the sun.
Yeah.
But it's just like, you could tell that they just whatever. Oh, here's a TOS 39. Got this like, and there's no, like, that to me is not impressive, right? That's not what I want to see. Like, we interviewed a guy that, he had a passion for dollar bin diving, and I thought that was awesome. Like, the enthusiasm that he would talk about with the, this LCS that he goes to, and they got these great dollar bins, and then every month they do a half off the dollar bin, and he goes to town and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I fucking love listening to him do a talk.
Yeah,
like,
that's awesome.
That to me is what I want to hear about.
Yeah.
So
what I like to hunt is, like I said, the thing that I can't say no to, and I don't know what that thing's going to be most of the time. Like, so it's weird. It's like, you want to be disciplined, but I want to be disciplined, but I want to leave room for that inspiration. So there's a fine line. But I've learned there are certain things I'm not going to get drawn to, because it's usually at the expense of the thing I really want. Like you mentioned, second appearances. There was a brief moment where I'm like, I'm going to get all the second appearances because I can afford them. And then I thought, well, that doesn't really make sense. Well, I'd rather just not do that and get one first appearance. Like, that's way a better idea than to get the second appearances. But there's 4 or 5. I've always got, I say 4 to 5, but it's probably closer to 10 books that are absolutely on my hunt list. Like, guaranteed, if that book comes up and the timing is right, the book is right, I'll buy it and I won't regret it. But then you think I went on a claim sale thinking today's the day I'm going to buy Gene Autry Comics issue 1? Definitely not.
You just saw it and stirred the emotions.
I was like, you know what? I just picked up that's only the second Western book I think the third Western book I've ever owned, and I sold the first one, so that's only the second one in my collection at all. But I just think, the Westerns are kind of this untapped area in the golden age that I think has room to grunt. And that's part of the fun for me too. I like the speculation. I like to be right. And I'm wrong more than I'm right, but it's fun when you get it right. And, I don't know if they're ever going to really take off, but I mean, romance books did. So,
I tell you, it's cool though when you meet a collector that's into them. Like there's not many great LCSs where I live, and so I don't go to them that often. But the last time I went, which is now a couple weeks ago, I went there and this guy came in and he was a huge Carl Barks collector.
Yep.
And, I had known who Carl Barks is. I know, obviously, Uncle Scrooge and these things like that. And I ended up just sitting there and talking with him for 30 minutes on his story and his interest in Carl Barks and what he wants to do and his goals. And it was awesome.
Yeah.
And, there's someone that's like that for Westerns, and I would love to meet him. And, I may not get me to buy them, but like, it's damn cool to hear about.
Yeah. And you can get like mega keys in Westerns for the most part inexpensively, like compared to other books. Like it's, the first appearance of the Lone Ranger is a whole lot cheaper than the first appearance of Batman, so, you can get into that. And I don't think I'm going to fall like into like the Western chase. But that's kind of creeped into my periphery. Like if I see a cool book at a good price and a good grade, I'm going to pick it up.
So let me ask it. Is kind of going down this road. Has pulps come into your periphery?
Yeah. In fact, I bought this one. I got it because I thought the cover was so cool. Like,
yeah,
I bought it for like $10 on a claim sale. So, and I have this other one that I picked up at years ago when I wasn't even back into comics yet. But I saw it at a swap meet for $5. It was a science fiction one that had stories by Asimov in it and stuff like that. So I picked that. It was a robot cover. I don't know if I don't think it's worth a lot, but yeah, I think the pulps are cool. They're really cool. But boy, when you get down that road, I mean, there's some expensive pulps, and they go back to the 20s, right? Like they're way back there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what is like, isn't like the grail of pulps, like the first Tarzan? I think.
Yeah, I think the first Tarzan, and then there's like a pulp that has the first time the Marvel logo was used, and then there's a pulp that has some of there's some horror pulps that have crazy value, or even some like sort of seedy pulps, sort of the bondage type stuff. They go for a lot too. But I love whenever the hobby opens it up into something new, because it's fun, right? Like there's so many ways to enjoy the hobby. You can enjoy it for the art.
And that's a good tangent too, because like into the kind of where I'm curious, like, because I've been having a lot of conversations recently with people that are like, what's my end goal and when do I blah blah blah, and I'm always just like, why do we need to have an end goal? Like, I feel like everything's always evolving, things are changing. There's always something fun to go after. Like, yep. I'm just going to keep again, if you have an end goal and you want to have an end goal, that's fair and fine. Yeah. But again, in my opinion, like, I'm just going to do it until I'm not having fun with it anymore.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't need to think about an end goal. I just think about, as long as I'm enjoying it, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, Rohan. That's exactly how I feel. And my interests, I feel they don't have any bounds. Like I can easily get excited about something I didn't know about yesterday. Like I wasn't really into the romance things, and I learned about the Matt Baker covers, and then and suddenly I'm like, yeah, I'd like to get one, but I don't have one. I don't have any romance comics at all, right? But I'm interested now. That they've one or two of those books is on my hunt list now. So, and what's cool is because I've sold some of my best books already in the past when we needed to, when it made sense to, my wife doesn't have a problem with me spending, as long as we're paying all the bills, we're putting money away for retirement.
She knows if you need it, you will do
exactly. I've earned that, I've earned that trust. She's like, yeah, well, do whatever. I mean, if we need the money, you'll sell them. I'm like, that's right. I will.
I want to actually mention real quick, since you said Matt Baker, I learned a great fact with Matt Baker books today and I don't know if everyone knows this, but so do you follow by chance on Instagram a guy named Norin Rad Surfs?
No, but I need to follow that handle. That's dope. Norin Rad Surfs is a great handle.
So just absolutely one of the best collections I know of that I see on Instagram. I mean, we've become somewhat friends on his, like, we chat every once in a while. The funny thing is how we got kind of connected. Like I had followed him, but so when I go to these cons, like, you know, you'll go to a con and you'll see a Superman one, you'll see a Captain America one, a high grade AF-15, you know, that'll be on a wall.
Right.
And, you know, I am, you know, when we're talking $100,000 books, like this is not even close to the realm I could even play in. Anyway, so a number of cons, I was like, hey, I asked the deal, I was like, can I just take a picture with that Captain America one? And so there was a Captain America one, and it was both these times. It was Jordan, who owns Semper Fi Comics. He's on Instagram. He's a great dealer. So he took a picture of the Captain America one. Previous con before that, I took a picture with AF-1570. Right, these are big time money books. Norrad Surfs, his name is Mark, is actually the guy who bought both of those books. And so, like, when he posted he got it, I was like, hey, that's the book that I took this photo with. And I would like send him my photo with me holding it. And then like it literally worked out with the next two books he bought were the two books that I took photos with
That's
at Jordan's
crazy.
books,
That's crazy.
at Jordan's booth. So anyways, today he posts his Phantom Lady 17, like the, you know, with Matt Baker, it's Phantom Lady 17 and it's 7 Seas 4.
Oh yeah, that's gorgeous cover.
Right. Anyways, yeah. So he posted his Phantom Lady 17, like one of the two Grail Matt Baker books.
Yep.
And then on it, like I read his caption, and it's like a 4.5, and it is it's a beautiful 4.5. And on it, he's like, lastly, and he's like, and in pink pages. And I'm like, the hell? Pink page? Have you heard of pink pages?
I've heard of it. Yes, I have. Okay. I don't know.
So,
I've never seen. I don't know what they mean.
And so at first, when I read that in the caption, I thought it was just some kind of inside joke. And then, if you look at the book, you know, where it usually says like white pages, off-white to white pages, whatever it says.
Yeah.
It said pink pages.
Yeah.
And so like, I ended up talking with him about this book today.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I just kind of DM'd him. I was just like, I never even knew pink pages was a thing. I just assumed pink pages was like somewhere along the spectrum from white pages to brittle.
Yeah.
Pink was in there, and I just had never heard of it. I was like, I never even knew pink was a thing.
Yeah.
And he goes, and he replied back. He's like, only serious collectors want this book in pink pages. And I kind of just gave it a ha emoji because I thought that was just like a joke.
Right. Got it. Yeah.
The good girl book, pink. What ha.
Exactly. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And then so he sent me like a voice message. He's like, hey, I don't know if that was sarcasm or if you actually don't know. So I'm gonna just, tell you this story. And if you didn't know this, like, I apologize. You can tell me to fuck off or whatever. And I was like, okay. So he starts talking. He's like, apparently Phantom Lady is one of the few runs, if not the only run. But I think, so he had said it's the only run, but then someone else was telling me like, maybe a couple other runs out of the Fox publications may have used it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, we know Phantom Lady. Apparently they used a different type of paper, and it is in fact pink. And so pink pages is like the white pages of this run.
Wow.
And so the big Phantom Lady 17 collectors all want that book in pink pages.
Oh, I did not know that. I didn't know that about the pink pages. I didn't understand it. I knew it wasn't a bad thing, but I didn't know I had no idea. Like, what does that mean? Like what you were saying, it's somewhere in that spectrum, but how does a book go from white to pink? Like what?
Yeah.
So it's actually different paper.
It's different paper. And then someone was saying, I haven't gone and done any more research, but then someone else was telling me like, yeah, because they got like a bunch of paper that was excess use from like legal documents. There's things like that. So I don't know all the details yet, but the pink pages or pink paper of some kind was used on the Phantom Lady run. And so you don't want white pages, you want pink pages, which is honestly then kind of fitty that it's used on Phantom Lady.
Can you see my Matt Baker trade paperback right there?
Yeah.
7 Seas.
Yeah.
That's the cover. That book's on my, that's like my secret list of, I'm never going to own this book, but it would be cool if I could. Like they're just way too pricey, but that cover is sick. Like it's such a great cover.
You know what's funny? I think about a lot. I don't know. Do you do a lot of like garage sales or good, like that type of shopping?
I have done it. But not lately, but I know good things could happen, right?
Yeah. And I mean, recently we all have seen the story of the Detective 27.5 that was found, and then I just sold for $312,000 at a garage sale. Anyways, my point being is like, I feel like, especially nowadays with the MCU and now the DCU that's coming about, like, you know, when people see Spider-Man, like they know, oh, people like Spider-Man, right? I do think though, like the greater chances now are running into one of these like PCH books or one of these romance books. Because again, like Phantom Lady 17 is just a gorgeous looking lady on this cover, but it doesn't, I'm sure it's a character. I don't know who the character is, but like it's not something like Spider-Man
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Batman, where like if you own it, like, oh, that Spider-Man, people like maybe this has got something, right? That's a book I feel like people would be like, well, whatever, some random dumb
Yeah,
comic my dad
Eerie
had.
Comics or something. Like you could pick up one of these books because it wouldn't be considered, this must be worth something. It's an early
Yeah.
Superman. Like, no, it's just this girl on a cover.
Yeah. So
You know?
I haven't found the time to do a lot of like that garage sale kind of thing, but I always think about like, I feel like that's what I'm more likely to find than I am to find like,
Yeah, that
some
would
big
be.
Silver Age Marvel book or something like
And
that.
that's when you know it's meant to be. Like I saw that. Here's an ethical question for you, because that came up. Somebody entertained it on YouTube recently. Like what is the ethical? What are the ethics of that? Like if you're at a garage sale and you see Detective Comics 27 for, it's for 10 cents, or what would you do? Now I know what I would do, and I consider myself to be an ethical guy. Like I'm not, I'm a Christian. I'm not going to steal from somebody. But if that person is slapping 10-cent price on that, I'm going to pay him and walk out. I'm going to say, thank you.
I mean, just like we said with that story with the Frank Miller book, like peace, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Like I always think about like when, this is not as big of a thing because cash in it as uses, but like, do you remember like in the 90s, people were like, oh, I found $400 and I turned it into the police station. I always thought like, you sucker. Like, what are you talking about? Like someone's just going to come claim 400, like get out of here.
Yeah, no, that's just pennies from heaven. Take it.
Yeah, exactly. And so if that doesn't tell you how I answer, like, again, I value myself as an honest person, as an ethical person. But in this scenario, as far as I'm concerned, everyone's got a phone. Everyone has the ability to do 2 seconds of research.
Right.
Or even if it's just looking something, everyone knows about eBay, right? At the end of the day, the way I look at it is that person decided they wanted to sell all this stuff that they have here.
Right.
And they put prices on it that would make them happy that it's gone and they made something off of it.
Yes, that's right.
Right. And in that scenario, if they put $2 on Phantom Lady 17, I'm going to grab it. I'm going to pay you $2 and then I'm going to run home and I'm going to post the shit out of it.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Because you didn't do anything wrong. You gave the seller the price asked, and that's it. It's not your job. It's not my job to educate somebody about what they have or they don't have. Like when I mentioned I'd sold that Longbox at a garage sale myself, most of that stuff in there was junk, but I did end up selling a Nova Comics issue #1 was in that bin, a mint copy of it for Nova 1 that I didn't realize Nova had become anything. I'd held that book forever and it was worthless. Guess what? Good on the guy who bought it. Like I got my $50. I was happy. I didn't really care. Like that's the way it works. And I would 100% feel right in making that deal. It's up to the other person. Now, if I'm sitting like behind in the line with someone at the grocery store and $100 bill drops out of their pocket, this happened to my
agreed.
This happened to my wife, and she's like, "Hey, you dropped $100," and that's totally different. But this is under the purview of an honest transaction. If that's the price they want for it, you just made their day by giving it to them, and they're selling that at a garage sale because they don't want to go through the trouble of actually figuring out what it's worth. That's on them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and again, like that's not to say that, and you and I are agreeing here. This is not to say that this is the absolute right opinion. Everyone do what you need to do. Right. I will tell you though, like I'm going to do that and I will not lose an ounce of sleep with it.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I know. Speaking of people disagreeing, there'll be people who disagree with me. Someone's going to say, "Well, all right, you call yourself a Christian. What about the golden rule? Would you want someone to do that to you?" I'm like, okay, guilty, but I'm still going to do it. Like I just to be honest, like I don't. That would be the reason why I would be dumpster diving at a garage sale. I wouldn't be doing it so I could find it for them and tell them what it's worth.
Yeah. Now to change that scenario up a little bit in a different way, let's just say someone I know is like, Rohan, I know you're into comics. My uncle has a whole garage full of comics that he just wants to get rid of. Would you be willing to go talk to him about, what he could get for this kind of thing. In that scenario, like I go in there and I find Phantom Lady 17. I would not lie to him.
Of course not.
Yeah, like in that I would be honest, but to me that's a completely different scenario.
Yeah, that's right. That's a complete your purpose for being there is to educate them. That's how you got access.
Now, in that scenario, I may look and be like, "Hey, you want to get rid of this? What if we make a deal? I take care of the work, and I, instead of you like give me a piece or paid me or whatever, like I will do all of this because I want this one book." Or, there's some kind of arrangement, but I would be totally honest about like, this is worth some money.
Yeah.
It's something I would love. If there's an arrangement we can come to where I can take care of this for you in exchange for that, or, whatever,
right.
I'd do that.
Of course. Yeah. And that would be, so yeah, that would be fair. And that's why I would go to a garage sale, and that's why I would go to a flea market or whatever, and flip around and spend the time, because that's the reward for the work. Mm-hmm. Because it is, like you mentioned, the guy who said he loves to go through the dollar bins. Well, I'm sure he loves, because he loves to hunt, and he's probably found some really good deals, but he put all the work in. That's hard work. That's a lot of time. Now he loves it, but he's still putting in his time. Mm-hmm. He deserves to get a good deal if he finds one. He's earned it. And that's how I feel about any business transaction. It's not like you're honest. You don't lie to somebody, but it's up to them to find to know the value of what they're buying, what they're selling, I should say. So
yeah, I agree. And it's not an era where, again, like access to information that's not a barrier anymore.
Right. Now, if it's some old lady on a fixed income and she's trying to like make rent, I think that would be different, but now we're really like cherry picking scenarios, because that's not
exactly.
Really
that's the details of the scenario. Like that's different.
Yeah, that's different. So like, I don't want everybody to think like I'm like this horrible person, but I mean, come on, mention in the comments, what would y'all do? Come on, let's be real. Be honest.
Yeah. Again, we're not saying this is not a function of we're taking advantage of people. This is a scenario where like these are able people that just have decided it's not worth my time.
Joshua went to an estate sale and he picked up a couple things. He found some. I'll let him tell you about it, but he found some trade paperbacks, like Frank Miller signed and a few other signature ones. So good on it. Good for him, right? And it wasn't like they were selling for a nickel, but he definitely got a cheaper deal than if he tried to buy it on eBay, right? So that and that's why he took the time to go. I'm like, dude, why didn't you? Well, you should let me know. I'll come with you. No, but we both can't go to the same estate sale. We'd wind up wrestling by the. Oh man, it's fun though. And the hobby's great because there's so many points of entry and so many ways that you can enjoy it. And nothing's wrong with any way you might want to enjoy it. And forums like this is just give us opportunity to share about what it is we love about it. So I appreciate you giving me the opportionity, because like I said, I could talk all day, man. About this.
No, I if you notice, my son just came in and it's like, we should wind down. But I do want to say, like, I do think one of these days too, like I would love to get on with you and Joshua to talk, a few things in this kind of genre that I think we could really riff on for quite a bit of time. So
I'm sure we'd love to have you on our on the comic room too. And these conversations are awesome. You fit right in, man. We might have to extend it to like a 3-hour episode though. But that's fine.
Right on. All right, real quick before we wrap, why don't you just tell everyone where to find you, all that good stuff, and then we'll call it.
Yeah, on Instagram, I'm at Mr. Longbox, Mr. Period Longbox, and on YouTube it's the same, Mr. Period Longbox. I'm not creating content. If you want to find our podcast, go to at Spro's Comics. That's where you'll find the comic room. That's where Joshua and I's podcast. But you can find the link to it on my Instagram as well. That's pretty much, those are all my socials that are comic book related. Like I said, I'm not really selling stuff. I'm just talking.
Yeah, you want to hear me talk? I'm the same. I wouldn't have any more links or anything beyond that too. So yeah. Awesome. Well, Bob, this has been great. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Rohan, thank you for having me, man. It's been a blast.
All right, to everyone, thanks for listening, and tell us what you would do in that scenario if you found a big book at a garage sale. And again, there is no wrong answer here. Like, You do what makes you feel best and right.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to hear what people think.
Yeah, give you the only wrong answer would be the dishonest answer. Tell us the truth. Come on.
Exactly. All right. Peace out, everyone.
Take care.